So my name's Jay, also known as by more people on the internet as Insightful, and I'm going to be doing a presentation basically on wallet security. I'm not a crypto security expert myself, but I fell to scams to FOMO and greed super early, kind of in my crypto journey, and it's just something that a lot of people don't talk about, and people get turbo wrecked on it, and people don't really care about it until it happens to them. So yeah, let's get into it. Some of the slides are kind of like super text heavy, but at the same time, a lot of it's created to be used as like source reading material as well. So in the space, everyone says they get hacked, right? But most of the time, it's typically user error. And then there's a vast variety of different creative ways hackers use to essentially exploit you. And basically, all of these types of hacks can be derived into two total main categories. And so that's basically abuse of previously granted token approvals and private key or seed phrase compromise, which is usually because they're storing assets on a hot wallet. So basically every type of scam can generally be boiled down to one of these two categories. So we'll go into those here. I did a thread previously on token approvals if you want to read that here, but basically I'm going to do a shorter version of that thread here. So token approvals are basically just you're giving a smart contract access to move a specific type of token or asset from your wallet. That's basically what a token approval is. Generally, this is most commonly seen like for OpenSea, because you need to give the OpenSea contract permission in order for them to move the NFT on your behalf if you want to sell it. And then the other one is commonly seen with like tokens. So the example would be like giving Uniswap permission to swap your coins, basically. So for clarity's sake, basically everything except for ETH is an ERC20. And you'll likely have to give approval for it at some point if you ever want to do a swap or a bridge. These are respectively 721 and 1155s. Very similar to ERC20. They're only really applicable on NFT marketplaces. The only main difference is that fungible, which just means they can be broken down into less than one whole amount, right? Because you can't have like 0.1 of an NFT or whatever, but you can have like, 2.2 of a USDC or whatever token you have.
Hey guys, just want to throw in a quick post edit here. So what I just said is technically incorrect. So in most cases, Fungible doesn't care actually about fractionalization. It's ERC20 is fungible because each token can be exchanged at an equal value of the same type of token. So for example, $1 bill can be swapped for another dollar bill. 1 ETH can be swapped for 1 ETH, etc. So I mentioned in the presentation about it being fungible, because you can break it down, but technically what makes an ERC20 token is that it can be swapped for another token of equal value, not necessarily that it can be broken down into smaller points, although that is a unique characteristic of an ERC20, which it's a bit of a nitpick, but it's just a unique characteristic of it. It's not necessarily the definition.
The initial token approval prompt from MetaMask actually gives you a lot of different information, and the most relevant of that information is essentially the token you're giving approval for, the website you're interacting with, the smart contract you're interacting with, and actually the ability to edit the amount of the token you're giving permission for. So here's an example here at the Uniswap where it shows Uniswap, you're giving access to Matic. This is the Uniswap contract you're getting access to, the option to change the permission, and then you can go to full transaction details to get a bit more information, but this is basically the core information there. And this is like the drop down under that information. Under the drop down, there's an additional approve function. So all ERC20s basically have the same characteristics because they have to follow the ERC20 standard. That's what makes them an ERC20 token. And one of them is basically to give the ability for smart contracts to move a token based on the approved amount. So a big thing is unlimited versus custom limit approvals for these tokens. So many DeFi apps by default actually prompt for unlimited approvals of the token. And the reason for this is it increases the user experience because it reduces the gas cost of you potentially having to give future approvals for that token in the future. So this is good, but it's also bad because if there's ever an exploit in that contract and it has unlimited approval for all those tokens, then you can potentially lose those tokens. So what I suggest people do is you can actually edit the permissions. So I have an example here where basically the default amount here, it prompts like, you'll basically see like this big number and then an exponent 59, which basically means unlimited. So that's the default, and you can actually edit it to a custom amount. So this is how much the smart contract is basically allowed to spend on your behalf before you need to give it approval again, essentially. So in my opinion, if you're like on an L2 or gas is cheap, there's really no reason to do it. It's obviously more annoying on ETH because it's like $2 to $5 every time you want to do another approval. Yeah, I think this is something that people don't really realize or talk about. So why does this matter? Basically, I just explained it. Manually editing the token approval sets the max amount the dApp can move before it's approved. And it's basically just a way to limit your downside risk, you know, and then people don't think it's going to happen or don't care. But previously, like an example was the multi-chain, which is like a bridge, a multi-chain bridge. There was an exploit for WETH as an example. So WETH is basically just ETH in an ERC20 token form. Since people had pre-approvals for WETH, because there was an exploit on the bridge, they basically had a bunch of their WETH drained from their wallet because of the unlimited token permission they gave, essentially, and then the link for that. So NFT approvals, it falls under the set approval for all function, which basically just means I'm giving this smart contract permission to move all NFTs from this specific collection or contract on my behalf. Yeah, so this is to make it transferable by a marketplace. So the way people get drained basically is malicious websites or mimic sites basically trick you into signing this set approval for all function. And then you're basically giving permission for that smart contract to basically move the NFTs / steal them on your behalf. That's basically what happens there. So the classic wallet drain for a FOMO-free mint, the user goes to a site, they connect the wallet to a site. So connecting a wallet to a site, just a quick side note, people think like it's dangerous or whatever. It like by itself, it's not dangerous, but what it does is it allows the website to see the contents of your wallet. And then typically what happens is they have like a script, or the website basically scans for the most valuable stuff in your wallet and then gets you to sign a set approval for all for those tokens without you realizing it, basically. And yeah, the scammer steals the tokens and then typically liquidates them into OpenSea or Blur bids. OpenSea has like a policy now where you have to like wait an hour, and same with Blur, like after you buy something. So this is mitigated a little bit, but for the most part, you're generally out of luck. So signatures versus approvals. So everything I just talked about was approvals beforehand. Approvals require gas. That's kind of the big main difference. So like if you see like a sketchy site trying to get you to sign something that requires gas, that's generally a more obvious red flag. Signatures are a bit sneakier because they're gasless and they're often used to sign into dApps or websites. It's a way for the website to basically identify that you actually control that respective wallet that's signing in. So generally they're lower risk, but they can actually be used to exploit approvals you've given in the past for sites like OpenSea. Also possible to have ERC20's approvals modified on stuff like 1inch. And here's a thread someone wrote about it to kind of go into that. And then I'll give an example of signatures, but generally signatures are pretty safe if you are interacting with the site you think you are. And basically the way they get abused is Kevin Rose is the best example for what happened there. So the token approval takeaways, basically be cautious when you're giving approvals for anything really. Make sure what tokens you're giving approval for and to what smart contract you're doing that for, and then limit your approvals. So another thing is you can actually, utilizing multiple wallets is a great way to mitigate risk as well, because the approvals are wallet specific, right? Because you're basically saying, this wallet is giving permission to this contract for this token, right? So the big one is like, don't sign approvals or interact with smart contracts if you have a vault wallet, basically. Or just, you could like spread it across multiple wallets. Like once you hit, a threshold of $5,000 in assets on this wallet, then, you're going to store it on another wallet. Like there's no downside really to creating multiple wallets. It's just kind of more tedious and annoying to kind of keep track of potentially. And then reduce or avoid unlimited approvals if you want for ERC20s. And then you can check and revoke your approvals periodically via Etherscan or a trusted site like revoke.cash. And you do that basically if you think you've been, or if you think you've interacted with the malicious contract, you use those sites to basically find that contract and revoke approvals. Typically it's too late at that point, to be honest. So basically the other one is seed phrase and private key compromise. The biggest mitigation against that is essentially using a hardware wallet. So for some quick context, a hot wallet is basically connected to the internet through your computer or phone. This means the key or wallet credentials are basically stored online in some form or in your browser. I'm not sure how it works exactly for MetaMask. It might just be like encrypted in your browser somehow, but there's basically an umpteen amount of ways to have your credentials stripped via the internet for hot wallets, which is why cold wallets are so important. So cold wallets are basically hardware devices where the key is generated purely offline and physically beside you. Seeing how a ledger's roughly $120. Like in my opinion, if you have like $1,000 or more in crypto, you should probably buy and set up a ledger and at least start to it's really just the initial friction for setting it up that's hard, because and people think like way more difficult, but you can essentially import it into your MetaMask with the connect hardware wallet feature to basically get the same functionality as another hot wallet. And it doesn't have to be like your cold storage or whatever. Like you can like have like intermediary wallets or lukewarm wallets, use within MetaMask or OpenSea or whatever. Ledger and Trezor are the most popular. I like Ledger because since it's the most popular, it seems to be the most compatible with like dApps and other things. The same reason kind of like people use MetaMask, because you have a lower chance of basically having compatibility issues with sites and all that. And I've spent like a bajillion hours troubleshooting all the things that can go wrong like with Ledger, and it's usually some UI interaction between MetaMask and the Ledger. So like for me, it's easier to troubleshoot that. So some tips for like buying the Ledger, like always, or any hardware wallet, always make sure it's from the official manufacturer. So don't buy it from eBay or Amazon. That's because it could be potentially compromised or preloaded with malware. So basically there's no peace of mind basically if you buy that, because they could potentially have access to whatever seed phrase you generate on that device. So make sure the packaging is sealed when you receive it. And when you set it up for the first time, it will generate a seed phrase. You can keep regenerating one if you want. Ideally, you should like regenerate it like 5-6 times and make sure it's like actually different. And then when you want to pick one, you only ever write it down physically on paper. And then I recommend people spend like the 50 to 80 bucks to get like a steel or plate version at some point, because it basically prevents the potential of it getting destroyed in fire and water. You hear like a ton of like examples of people, who had their Bitcoin, whatever seed phrase in 2014, and then it gets lost or destroyed because they had it on like 1 or 2 paper copies, and then you basically lose access to all your crypto forever. The other big thing is never take a picture or type the seed into any form of keyboard, on phone included. The reason for this is you're basically digitizing the seed and you're turning your cold wallet into basically a hot wallet now. So you're only ever physically writing it down on paper. The only time you will ever need the seed phrase is if you're physically punching it in to like a new ledger to like restore the seed phrase on it. That's like the only time ever. You're never typing in a keyboard, never typing in your phone. The reason for the picture is a ton of people have had like, it gets auto backed up to their iCloud or whatever, and they don't know it. And then someone hacks the iCloud, you're toast, right? So just think of the crypto is basically, think of it being stored on the seed phrase, kind of. The crypto isn't stored on the hardware wallet, but all the wallets generated under the seed phrase. So I can have my ledger destroyed, whatever. As long as I have that seed phrase, that 12 to 24 words, I can, re-import that onto any hardware wallet in the future. I've heard examples of like refugees who've crossed borders, and all they had was like the 12 words memorized in their head. And that's how like they transferred their wealth essentially. So that's why it's so powerful in a sense. It's some super text heavy slides, but they're important. So basically what I just went over, the seed phrase is everything. It must be protected at all costs. It gives full control and access to all the wallets generated under that seed. So basically if you lose the seed and the original hardware wallet that the seed was imported into, you basically lost everything, right? This is why it's so important to, properly protect it. There's various levels of storage. Like you can split it into multiple parts. You can add physical distance between it, stored in like unobvious places, at a soup can at the bottom of your freezer, underground somewhere on your property. I know like Snowfro, who is like one of the founders of Artblocks, who has tens of millions of dollars in NFTs because he was early and has all these punks. He basically has his seed phrase like basically split into like 3 different parts in 3 different states in like banks or something, right? So that's like the most extreme level that you can go to, but that's basically to protect himself, right? If someone ever, fights him in real life and holds him under duress because they know he has tens of millions of dollars in crypto assets, he has plausible deniability of not having access to that seed because he doesn't actually have it on him. For most people, I would say you should have at least 2 to 3 copies of it, and use like, a good pen so it doesn't wash off, and, and then spend like the 50 to 80 bucks to get like a steel version of it. And the steel version is just like, you're just etching the seed onto a steel plate, basically. When people say, so private keys, when people refer to private keys, it's kind of like the seed phrase, but it's only wallet specific, generally used to import hot wallets into like new MetaMask accounts or like into a bidding bot or sniping tool if you want automation, because you're basically you're giving that software permission to put transactions on that wallet on your behalf. So there's actually the 25th word on Ledger. So addition to the 24 words, Ledger actually has an optional additional security feature. So this passphrase is an advanced feature that adds a 25th word in addition to the seed phrase on top, and that could be a max of 100 characters. So using this passphrase actually causes an entirely different set of addresses to be created under the original seed phrase address. So aside from adding another layer, so the main reason for this is it grants you plausible deniability while under duress. You have to remember this perfectly character for character. It's basically the only final defense against the $5 wrench attack situations where you're threatened physically. What the $5 wrench attack is basically like, you could have all the best crypto security in the world, but if someone, takes a $5 wrench or figures out where you live, and they say, give me your seed phrase, or I'm gonna, cut off your pinky, or put a drill through your hand, or hurt your family members, you're kind of out of luck, right? You're probably gonna concede, right? There's been people, there's tons of stories of people, with Bitcoin wealth who have been captured and tortured for weeks until they basically are forced to comply. So what this does basically is like, let's say you give up, you're like, okay, stop. This is the seed phrase, da 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 da. They get the seed phrase, and you have like 5 ETH on the wallet, but actually, you have the 25th word, which is whatever your word you want. And under that, you actually have like 50 ETH or the rest of your wealth. So and there's no way for them to prove that the 25th word even exists, right? That's the key point. So that's super powerful in itself. Yeah, and I don't know if other hardware wallets have it, but the Ledger does have it. I think it's super interesting. I think this is more applicable, if you're like net worth, 6 figures plus or whatever high net worth is to you. It's basically to protect you in physical threatening situations. So why go through all this friction to set up the hardware wallet, basically? The hot wallets store the private keys in a location that's connected to the internet. It's actually deceptively easy to be tricked, deceived, or manipulated into revealing or giving these credentials via the internet. So having the cold wallet means that the scammer would physically need to find and take your ledger or seed to have access to those wallets. The seed compromise basically means that all hot wallets and assets are at risk, even those that haven't interacted with the malicious site or contract. So I see people all the time who are like, they think it's in a safe because it's in a hot wallet, that it's in basically a burner wallet, that they're not interacting with any site. But it doesn't matter, because if they have the seed, if their seed gets compromised, or they download malware, whatever, there's a bunch of ways for it to happen. It doesn't matter if that wallet has interacted with anything, because they have control of every wallet that was under that seed phrase. So people thinking that just having an isolated hot wallet is the same as a cold wallet is like an argument I've had a few times with people. So just something to note there. Some common ways people have been hacked in the past via hot wallets. So basically tricking into downloading malware. So job offers via PDFs, beta testing games is a big one. They'll offer you like a mod job or a game. They'll basically mimic a fake game, get you to beta test the game, and you're like, you're downloading the exe and you're basically downloading malware. This is why like launchers like Elixir or a few others are, preferred, because there's kind of like a sense of safety within that. Running macros within Google Sheets, imitations of legitimate sites and services, interacting with malicious contracts, FOMO minting, interacting with the contract from unknown airdrops or received NFTs, inserting or sending keys or seed to customer support, or basically typing it in to anything. Those are just a few that I thought off the top of my head. So some examples of high profile hacks. So for Kevin Rose, he went to go mint a collection, I believe. I don't know what it was. I think it was art blocks, I believe. He basically signed into the site with a gasless signature, thinking he was just logging into the mint site. But because of Seaport or the new OpenSea contract, the way it works is you can create custom orders and then you can accept those with just a signature. So basically what happened was the site, so the site basically abused all the previous permissions he gave for his like squiggles and all his moonbirds and all that stuff. They basically abused the set approval for all he already signed for OpenSea. He was on this random site. He saw this OpenSea pop up, like sign into OpenSea. And then basically what he did was he basically sold all his NFTs to the hacker in like a custom order for like basically $1 or free. And this is like a really sneaky one, to be honest. It's gasless. It's the signature. It's the one that feels and, is seen as more safe. So the key takeaway would be signatures can also be abused if they take advantage of previous approvals. And the big one is like, don't sign OpenSea approvals on sites other than OpenSea, and don't interact with contracts or websites with a Grail or main vault wallet. Just send it to an intermediary wallet beforehand and use that to interact the whatever site you interact with. That's basically how that could have been prevented. So NFT God, basically what he did is he basically imported his account into MetaMask and typed in his seed phrase. So when you do the import account option, that's for basically like importing hot wallets. The connect hardware wallet option, it will bring you to a screen. It will say like plug in the ledger, and then the wallets will show up. The import account, you're basically typing in the seed phrase to do it. Turned his cold wallet into a hot wallet by doing that without knowing it, I guess. And to his defense, like the UI on MetaMask doesn't warn you or really tell you. But like, to be honest, he kind of should have known better. So he tried to download OBS, which is just like, a normal recording software. ODS, which was promoted as malware at the top of Google. And it basically drained all his hot wallets. And since his cold wallet was a hot wallet, it drained everything he had. And then the key takeaway, never digitize the seed in any way, typing any form of a keyboard, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so that's how that would have been prevented, basically. How to make yourself bulletproof to scam. So basically different ways to, prevent, kind of like mental checklists you can go through to help yourself. So make sure the contract address and website you're interacting with is legit. Don't trust verify. You can see on the MetaMask approval screen, it gives you the website, the contract address. You can check this contract address on Etherscan and see so I'm using Uniswap as the example. See it's publicly labeled as Uniswap. You can see there's over 14 million transactions and constantly 25 plus pending transactions on this contract address for swaps. A fake scam Uniswap contract probably wouldn't have these metrics. So this is the example I was trying to find earlier. It's saying, hey, you're interacting with Uniswap. This is the contract. You go to the contract. It says, hey, it's publicly labeled as Uniswap in the DEX. It's over here, the V3 from deployer. A fake contract probably isn't going to have 14 million transactions on it with 25 pending constantly. And, it's labeled and all that. So just a way to check there. Periodically check and revoke your token approvals. There's no downside really other than another gas transaction in the future. And some common tools. We kind of went over that. You can use free browser extensions such as Pocket Universe, Wallet Guard, Mint Defense if you're early on New Tokyo, I guess. These are kind of like a last line of defense. They basically let you see what you're actually doing. So it's kind of like a pre-screening, like, hey, you interacting with this contract address is actually doing this. So it kind of gives a more human readable version of what you're actually approving for in MetaMask. Obviously, they shouldn't be blindly trusted, but this has saved a lot of people like in the past, and they're free. So there's not really much downside other than, it's a bit slower to load. Custom approval over unlimited, kind of went over that. Multiple wallets, I kind of went over that. Approvals are wallet specific, spread the funds over multiple wallets equals reduced risk. So, and then basically utilizing cold and hot wallets. Healthy wallet structure is super important. Majority of assets should be on a hardware wallet. The key thing is like a ledger will not protect your tokens if you're basically giving approval to a malicious contract. The ledger is basically a way to confirm that you are the only one that can confirm that transaction. But again, if you confirm a transaction for something that's malicious, it's malicious, right? This is just explaining what connecting means, which I explained earlier, where people think like connecting your wallet to a site is like going to scam you. All it does is let the site see what the contents of the wallet, but it uses those to basically, scan what it wants to trick you into approve for. This is a really good infographic that I like and refer to a lot by WAGMI University, breaking down like, hey, you should probably have like, at least 2 hot wallets, and the nice thing is like, if you have like a burner wallet or hot wallet, then you can use that for the, the very time sensitive FOMO. You're not sure what this contract is or whatever. You can just use a burner wallet. And if it's a scam, it doesn't matter. It's a burner wallet, right? You've got like $10 on it. So that's fine. And then there's kind of like different versions of cold wallets where, you could have like lukewarm or medium cold wallet where that wallet is the one interacting with OpenSea or other sites. And then there's like ice cold wallet, if you want to refer to that, where you're only essentially moving things in and out. You could have a completely separate ledger for that potentially as well. But yeah, there's definitely no downside for more wallets. I guess this kind of rolls into the next part, but basically, just because it's coming from an official Twitter or site, doesn't mean it's actually safe, because it's actually deceptively easy for social media accounts to be hacked. And then this is an example where basically this 17-year-old stole millions of dollars by somehow getting past 2FA with Authenticator app on Twitter for all of these accounts, and basically fished a bunch of people, and he only got like 6 months probation because he was 17. So You got lucky there. Getting pretty long here, but there's some other general internet crypto stuff I think I'll go over quickly because I think it's important and people should have it or know about it. So ideally, always use 2FA whenever possible and use an authenticator app like Authy or Google. The reason for this is if you're just using SMS or phone text, this leaves you vulnerable to a SIM swap, which isn't very difficult to pull off. They basically just have to pretend that you are the person on the cell phone provider, and then basically all the text messages go to their cell phone, and then they start to reset all your passwords. But having an authenticator app basically prevents this. Sometimes you don't have the option, take the authenticator app option if you can, but for stuff like banks and other stuff, like they're still using SMS because they'll lose more money trying to convert people, I guess, even though they could make it an option. And then you can actually use something like a YubiKey, which is basically the next level of 2FA, and it's basically like a ledger, but for logging into your Web2 account. So you basically, when you want to log in, you basically have to plug in the key and then you tap it and it like puts in a code. So that's basically a more secure version. These are like 50 to 70 bucks each. So something to consider. I got to go over passwords. People use the same password. The way to go around this is just use a password manager. Basically all you have to do is remember the core password for the password manager, and you can create complex passwords for every password because a lot of people have the same easy to guess password for everything, and then you're screwed. And then this basically saves and autofills every password that you want for it. And a strong password is basically using multiple letters, characters, numbers, special characters. As you can see here, if you have number, upper and lowercase letters and symbols, and it's only 14 characters, it's going to take 16 million years for that to get brute forced. It's worth the time, I think. I just have to remember like one semi-long password, which is just like a few phrases for the password manager, and then everything's saved and auto-filled in there. So I don't actually have to type in the passwords or username for anything. I just load up the extension and auto-fill it. I like Bitwarden. A lot of other people seem to as well because it's open source, audited, encrypted. There's social proof with other people using it. The premium version is only 10 bucks a year. You can check if your email password has been compromised through I've been pwned. For antiviruses, Windows Defender is actually better than it used to be like 4 years ago. Apparently the free McAfee with Windows 11 is trash. Cybersecurity authority accounts such as Wildcard, etc. seem to recommend the paid version of Malwarebytes as an antivirus. And I think this has to do with how it basically detects and prevents the threats. For social engineering, assume everyone is an actor, is a bad actor, I should have it there. Even if you think it's coming from an account you trust, it's very possible that their account has been compromised. No support agent should ever be asking you to interact with a contract. Share your screen, give them remote access to your computer, or type your seed phrase in any type of anything. This is like privacy focused emails. Don't send credentials over email. People like Proton Mail. This is kind of like not a big deal. This is more so like, hey, you get the similar functionality Gmail without having Gmail, read all your emails to sell you ads. Don't use public Wi-Fi for doing crypto transactions. Don't let random people use your hotspot. Telegram, only stuff in secret chat is actually encrypted. Stuff, typically only the messages in transit are encrypted. You should assume anything you're sending over here, like, could be found or revealed as well. For JavaScript blockers, it helps protect against malware being deployed. You can use an open source one. For Chrome, you basically have to toggle it off by default. But if you use something like Tor or Brave, it blocks it by default. I'm kind of like a Brave maxi because it's basically Google Chrome, but it's less resource intensive and your data isn't getting harvested by Google. And you have the same functionality as like all the Google Chrome extensions that you like and want to use. That's why I say that. For VPNs, it's like 80 bucks a year. It's kind of like your condom for the internet. You can do fine without it, but it protects you from different potential downsides that over time become harder and harder to ignore. It gives you some protection from websites that want to harvest your IP. For picking a VPN, ideally you don't want to use something that logs your data or is located in any of the nations a part of these eyes. The eyes are basically international, like an agreement for international surveillance between countries because they aren't allowed to kind of surveil or collect that data on their own citizens, but they're allowed to share it between each other conveniently. Avoid free VPNs, pay with a prepaid card, gifts or crypto. It removes your personal credit card info from the VPN provider. Most top 10 VPN sites are sponsored and are just there to get referral link traffic. I like Proton. I've heard Mullvad is also good, and Express also gets shielded out on YouTube vids, but I don't think they log your data. But the key point is like you just don't want them to log your data. I know Nord gets shilled a lot. I think they log your data though. If you don't care about privacy, how would you feel if you got the following message? This is basically just me going over the $5 wrench attack, but basically this is someone saying like, hey, I know you have a lot of crypto. Sent them proof that they know their personal info. They're saying, I'm going to share that with people in your area. Send me money to this address, and I'll leave you alone. Basically, if you don't, anything bad that happens to you, your family is basically your fault. Kind of why privacy matters, especially and, especially in crypto, and especially if you have a lot of crypto. Basically, the conclusion is wallet token security is a very unsexy topic that struggles to get visibility. The sad reality is most people don't care or feel it's not worth the initial learning until they get drained or someone high profile gets hacked, and then everyone LARPs and engagement farms about it for about 48 hours, and then they stop caring. The key thing I think is just having a cautious and defensive mindset is very important. Like, assume every contract or person you're interacting with is malicious. Project or person sends a tweet that's off, just prompting you to do something that could be a security risk, but it's from the verified Discord. It doesn't matter. Their social account could get hacked. And the other thing I do is I assume everything in the hot wallet is basically already stolen or compromised, right? I'm assuming it's going to be stolen at any point, and I keep assets in there proportional to that amount, right? So you see people storing like all their expensive NFTs and all this stuff in their hot wallets, and then they get drained because of the malware, because it's really easy to strip that private and seed phrase from the hot wallets, and then they lose everything basically. And then my disclaimer that I probably should have put at the start is I'm not a crypto or cybersecurity expert, whatever that means exactly. This is basically all taught through continuous learning and multiple sources. I got myself scammed through FOMO and greed very, very early. It wasn't through like any of the typical methods or anything I said in this presentation, but it was from a fake live stream scam and a fake medbot scam coming into the space. So very early on, I just took the time to kind of learn and set up security, and don't be the guy who's forced to learn about security because you lost everything, painfully large amount. That's it. Don't get wrecked. That is it. Any thoughts, questions? Too long, too short?
Nice, Jay. Yeah, I mean, I think that for 5 minute presentations, this doesn't exactly fit the bill because it's definitely way longer. I think it's about 35 minutes. What we can do is I think that it would be helpful to probably break this down into 3 5 minute presentations because I think you've covered a lot of different topics here. So we can chat offline about how we want to do that. I think especially the setup, the screenshot that you showed of the wallet setups is very similar to what I have. I have probably about 16 wallets, and I do classify them as like basically super cold versus full burner wallets. So one of the presentations could just be about, hey, like why does this setup matter, right? And then another one of the presentations can be about basically the most common ways that people get scammed, because that's, I think, a really important element of everything that you said as well. Because if people know kind of what they're looking for, they'll know to be a little bit more cautious. I think a lot of times until you get scammed or you're like very close to getting scammed, you don't take it as seriously. But those are like 2 5 minute presentations I can see just straight off the bat. And the last one I can see is kind of the more generalized version that you talked about at the end, right? It's not crypto specific, but related to password length, VPNs, antivirus, stuff like that. So we could break all of that down. And already, since you have so much written, we can also turn this into a blog post if you haven't already written something like this. So when I release the On-Chain Marketer website, my idea is that everyone in the community will be able to put their own name under the brand of On-Chain Marketer, and we can publish really good content essentially around each of the topics that people feel like they have good content to contribute around. And so, yeah, we can work on that. I think there'll be a lot of good stuff there. And so let's do a couple of questions because I know that for Akash, it's probably like almost midnight. And I do want to get to his presentation as well, but I'll read Handra's question and then Andre's question, and then we can go from there. So Handra asked, regarding antivirus, I use AVG Premium. Any other preferences or programs that work better in your opinion, Jay?
Yeah, so it's weird. It seems to be depend on who you ask. I think I would say is just if you're using some form of paid version, that's better than nothing. If for whatever reason, a lot of the people seem to recommend the paid version of Malwarebytes. I'm not sure
why. I think it, basically based on their security background, they seem to feel that it does a better job at analyzing and preventing security or whatever. So like maybe, when AVG expires, maybe consider Malwarebytes, but it's really hard because, you Google it and, it's all sponsored in top 10, whatever, whatever. So I don't think, it's a big deal. It's just better than nothing, to be honest. And even if you didn't have an antivirus, if you're using cold wallets properly, it shouldn't matter. Because let's say you do download malware, they're only going to get the stuff off the hot wallets anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I've been using Malwarebytes, the paid version, for probably like 10 years plus. I love it. It catches a lot of things that other antivirus don't catch. And also, like a lot of the other antivirus is quite sketchy because it's actually like tracking your data and it's trying to leverage that and give you promotions all the time. It'll be like, hey, AVG is 30% off for the next whatever or something like that. So it seems very corporate esque and more at money making than it is really about protecting your computer. Versus Malwarebytes has always kind of stuck to a fixed price structure. I don't know how much it is, but I used to pay like $30 a year or something, and that's like what I would pay for one gas transaction during the bull,
Yeah,
right? To
yeah.
protect all of your assets, especially because one of the most common things is people Google for stuff in the space, and that's really bad because, like we saw with the NFT God example that Jay showed, the reason that he downloaded not OBS but ODS was because he Googled for it, and Google was letting these scam links go through, right? And that happens for almost any NFT project. Like if you go and Google it, it's gotten a little bit better now, but especially last year, you could never find the official website by Googling it. This is why I always tell people to like go on the Discord, look at the official links channel and go through that. Don't even search anything because you're at risk. But if you do go through that, Malwarebytes just does a really good job catching that. And they're also constantly updating their stuff. So even new hacks and things that come about, because security is always kind of a cat and mouse game where people start to protect themselves, hackers come up with new ways. People start protecting themselves, hackers come up with new ways. And so having something that's more paid, if you're on Windows, is better. There are a couple of tools for Macs as well that are pretty good. I don't remember off the top of my head because it's a one-time payment on Mac, I think, and you can just keep it on forever. But I can post that later down the line. But yeah, I would like Jay said, I would say generally the paid stuff is definitely a lot better than the free stuff, including for VPNs especially and proxies and things like that. All right, so from Andre, we have I'm using Bitdefender antivirus and VPN. I've had many cases of mints where I couldn't load the website when the VPN was on, regardless of location/country. Any idea why that happens?
Yeah, couldn't load the website. I don't know, to be honest. I did have Bitdefender for a year. It might be like the website doesn't like that you have a VPN. It could be the type of VPN. Um, the only thing I would suggest, like maybe turn it off before you're minting if it's super time sensitive. I've typically not had that issue too much. Or maybe an alternate laptop that, yes, always loads when I turn it off. Hmm. I don't really have a good answer for that, to be honest. I don't know about you, AJ.
Yeah, I've seen this happen a lot actually on Mint as well. I personally use ExpressVPN. I'm a huge fan. You mentioned it in your presentation, and yeah, that's another product I've been using for probably about 5 years and paying for it. It's extremely reliable. It allows you to have basically multiple devices set up. So I have it on my mobile, I have it on my wife's computer, I have two different, one PC, one Mac. So I have two Macs, one PC. I have it on all of them basically. I don't always use it. There are sites especially streaming sites that are looking to see if you are using a VPN, and they can basically serve you up a different code if you are using VPN. Some of it is to protect against things like DDoS attacks and certain other malicious things that people can do if they're on, kind of like untracked networks. So that might be the reason some of the code is situated like that. In those cases, you almost always have no choice except to basically shut off your VPN during that time. If you have sometimes different VPNs work better than other VPNs. So maybe for Bitdefender VPN, it doesn't work that well because of the way that they're using, like the way that it's set up. But maybe ExpressVPN could work. I'm not sure. Generally, I haven't had a huge trouble with ExpressVPN whenever I've been using it for Mint, but I do have that occasionally. A lot of times I've seen that just from location as well. So sometimes when I was minting, for example, if I was in Singapore, the mints don't go through, or it registers that I'm somewhere else, and it's like, oh, it, for whatever reason, it's blocking it. Some of that is based off of actually third-party plugins that websites use. So there are tracking software that is like tracking for a certain activity, and if your location setup triggers something that it's like, hey, this person may be a malicious actor, it just won't let you go to the next step. So most of the time, I think the solution, unfortunately, is to just shut it off, do the mint. But like Jay said, if you're doing a mint on kind of this burner wallet or a degen wallet or anything like that, it's usually okay.
Yeah, I agree. I used Express last year as well. I had a pretty good experience. Sometimes it would like bug out, and if it doesn't, like, if you have it set so basically it disconnects your internet if it doesn't connect properly, like that can be annoying, and I had to reset. I also feel like if Bitdefender is an antivirus, like that's the core product, and then they're kind of shilling you the VPN as an add-on, it's probably not going to be as good as something that is purely a VPN product, I would guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, nice. Well said. Cool. Thank you, Jay, so much for presenting. I don't know if you want to stop the recording.